Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Today, I am joined by Michele Lyman. Michele, I just want to thank you for joining me today.
Oh, I want to thank you for the invite and all that you do for the abortion survivors like
I
myself.
always start by letting people share who they are. And sometimes I share, a title or maybe what their profession is. But I also want to just kind of kick the ball straight to you to say, who's Michele Lyman?
Well, I'm a wife. Yeah, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, a grandmother, a sister, a friend, and a daughter and all those things. And I think the most important thing in this world right now is love. And I think that because I survived, I've had the opportunity to spread a lot of love and a lot of light and be a salt. So and I'm also an entrepreneur. Run 3 different businesses that are all small family-owned businesses, so
And that's why I wanted you to start, because I think that's the epitome of most of us as survivors. And I know for you as well, Michele, is once people find out that you're an abortion survivor, sometimes it can be easy to forget that there's so much more to you than just what you survived. It's a huge part of you, especially when we heal. It becomes this overwhelming, beautiful part of us that changes families and changes the world. But you're you're a wife, you're a mom, you're a grandmother, you are a successful businesswoman. Like, there are so many things to you that I want people to see beyond the word abortion survivor.
well, I was 17, and I was visiting with my mom. I was sitting in her room, and I could still remember right where we sat, that little table, and it was I just felt such a close connection with her. It was a good visit. We were talking about different things, and she looked at me and she said, "Missy, it's a miracle you're even here." And she did it with so much love and, gratefulness in her heart. And at the time, I had been run over twice before I was even 3. And so I assumed, well, yeah, it's a miracle I wasn't killed, as a baby being ran over. Second time was with a truck over my head. And so I just said, I just thought, yeah, of course, it's a miracle I'm even here. But she continued. And as she continued to share, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I mean, she went on to tell me how she had had an abortion when she was pregnant with me, how she was at a bar and she met someone that told her he could take care of her problem. And there he led her up a staircase to a room above the bar. And that's where the procedure took place. She thought she was going to die. She bled so heavily that she was so afraid. Her and my biological father both went on to explain to me how they were afraid, and they were using powdered sugar, which seems so crazy, to try to stop the bleeding. Which, when you think about a lot of the reasons women died back then with the illegal abortions was because of infection. And, I think sugar, yeah, that's a good way to get a good infection. So it's a miracle that, it really is a miracle. And, hearing that, at 17, I kind of felt like I was on the top of the world. Things were going really good and I felt real good about my life. And then it was like being thrown to the ground. I mean, I just was like a kick in the gut. I just almost was breathless. It was so devastating to hear that. And the reason it was so devastating is because of what I knew and understood within our culture. that how they perceived these unwanted babies that were aborted, that these little babies had no value and they were garbage and they were trash. And that became a part of my identity, and because I identify with them. And it wasn't until years later, after discovering the Abortion Survivors Network, that the healing began. And I'm so grateful for that. And I mean, for years, I think it was 30 some years. Well, maybe more than that. I'd have to, yeah, probably 30 some years before I discovered ASN, and that's been life changing for me.
I want to pause you for just a second because I think what you said is so relatable, not just for other survivors, but for, I think, men and women like your biological mom and dad who experience abortion on the other end than us, which is when something happens, it changes us, right? For survivors, it is something that we may not have memory of, but it dramatically changes us, whether it's a physical impact. We know that stress in utero rewires us. We get our fight or flight turned on. I know you have dealt with that in your life. I still deal with it still today. My off switch just never turns off. And thank God has given me a life where I could run with the on switch. But I'm still learning, right? That's not normal. That's not healthy for us to have our on switch completely running. But I think the other piece is that experience impacts how we see not just the world, or maybe our mom and dad who experienced that, who made that choice because of a circumstance, but it also dramatically impacts our identity. So I'm wondering if you could talk about that a little bit. What did it do to your identity, Michele, to know that you had survived an abortion and our culture says, meh, right? It's just a choice. Those children were unwanted, unloved, and unworthy anyway. What did that look like then in your life when you took on some of that identity?
Yeah, a lot of shame, a lot of pain, a lot of secrecy, fear of rejection. And you think about like these innocent babies, because a lot the culture really does have a huge impact on all of us, and it matters. And so whenever uh, people are voting certain ways, and they're going and they're yelling and they're holding signs, and they're you know more than not being against it, they're very much for it. um, it's painful, and it should be unthinkable. I mean, I think if anybody were really to really think about it, what is abortion? I can't believe that they would be okay with it ever for any reason.
Were
And
you,
so,
I mean, I know you were surprised to hear from your mom about that abortion attempt, but when you look back on your mom's life, was there a part of you that looked back in retrospect and went, huh, this makes sense?
I think so. Yeah, I think it does change the person when they do something like that, because they need healing too. And I think maybe for her, and it kind of creates almost a disconnect from the biological children, because if you think about it, and I think it opens the door for other abuse, right? Because if we're not valuing the child in the womb, then there's a good chance that we're not going to value them outside of the womb as much either. Whenever the culture says they don't have value, they should have value from conception. It's the same person. And so I think maybe that with her, and I also think about what would her life have been like had the abortion been successful? That would have been really tragic. Um, and just thinking about, I was there when she drew her last breath. Out of all of her children, I was able to be there for her. Had the abortionist did what he was out to do, I wouldn't have been there. I wouldn't have been there for my grandmother who I helped. I wouldn't have been there for my dad or my siblings or my husband. So every life matters. And when we kill a preborn baby, we do so much more than that, because every one of those preborn children has so much potential within them, and they're wiping out so much.
I'm glad that you talked about what a positive impact you've had on your mom's life. I know that it is not easy in a family, even after an abortion doesn't go the way someone planned it to, right? There is anger and fear and stress typically, right? And shame and guilt and uncertainty. And then we see that sort of fly out in different ways if we don't reach people with healing. So, you know, we see abuse and neglect, right? We see addiction, we see dysfunctional family relationships. And often, right, survivors get stuck in that struggle of it because whether people are consciously aware of it or not, survivors sometimes become the scapegoat because somehow when we live in a world that says, well, that baby was the problem, well, then when the baby lives, people are acting out on, oh, well, the baby was the problem and that's why we have a problem.
Right.
And I'm always the first person to say, and I know you and I can easily talk about this, not just personally but publicly. I'm the first one to say to our general public, like, that does not make abortion okay. Michele should not have been aborted because of the circumstances her family was going through, just like I should not have been aborted by the circumstances my birth mother was in. But it's to say that we need to reach people not just with truth about abortion and that it's the taking of a human life and it's going to impact everyone involved, but we have to reach people with healing even after abortion, whether it's successful or not, because therein lies that big additional piece of trauma that just keeps building for people. And knowing you and your mom and your mom is someone that you still deeply love today, even though she's gone from this world. And
I do.
I know how much you were there for her. And not just at that very end of her life, but throughout her entire life. And I want to paint that picture for people to understand, like, this is also the story about abortion survival. Yes, it is circumstances that lead women to abortion, and then there can be the shame and the guilt and the uncertainty. And then when survivors, whether we know our story or not, right, we struggle with the shame and the guilt, the identity, and need to find other people like us. But then we come out on the other side of it. And this is about hope. This is about love. This is about forgiveness. And so, what would you say to somebody who's listening to this episode and they're thinking, wow, Michele, like, you cared for your mother who attempted to abort you, and life was not always easy in your family. How did you do that?
I like one of the things I've heard you often say, how that, it isn't, moms and babies shouldn't be pitted against each other. That's a natural relationship that's automatically, there's such a love there and a bond there. No matter what, it's real. I think it's unbreakable. And so, yeah, that, and none of us are perfect, and love covers a multitude of sin, and grace is so powerful. So, and I think, that's really the answer to the forgiveness and to the healing and the hope.
And you are a person of faith. And so forgiveness is a part of that equation with your mom.
Mhm.
How do you walk that out? I mean, I know it's hard to sort of like describe sometimes. How do you forgive? But like, what did that look like?
I think for me, there was a lot growing up of neglect and different things, because life, and all of it had a lot to do with our culture. I think a lot of people that grew up during that time that I did experienced it. And I mean, I was born in 65, abortion became legal in 73. So how much rhetoric and how much was going against the family and against motherhood prior to it being legalized. You know, how much what was all that noise out there, right? That noise was part of the problem. And so, and I think for me right now, what brings healing to me is being able to share my story and help people, and help people that have had an abortion, or other abortion survivors, and hopefully to help others to not make that choice and to be a support to them so that they won't have to experience the pain of abortion. So,
Yeah, you are part of our strong Pac Northwest survivors. I have to give our Pac Northwest survivors a shout out, because abortion survivors are everywhere. We like to educate the world about that, that we're somebody's sister, friend, wife, neighbor, church member, right, business partner, all those things. And we don't typically wear it on our sleeve. And so we serve hundreds of abortion survivors and their families a year. And not everybody talks about it. It's more common to not talk about it in public than it is to talk about it. But we support people no matter what in that. But, you are part of that core group of folks who sort of all came to ASN at the same time and received healing and received this incredible and really built this incredible community that we have both online and in public. And then you've gone forward now and you share your story.
What's really neat too that I'd like to share about my mom is she was so supportive of me sharing. I mean, she was encouraging me because I'd be there to try to spend time with her and help her and have it about her. But while I was there, I was getting ready to go speak in Colorado, and she was just, nope, you work on your speech, you work on that, you get ready. And she was one of my biggest champions. This was so important to her, that because she knew the pain, and so she was very supportive of Abortion Survivors Network and all that we're doing. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, it's a little off of what you're asking, but I think it's important. I was about 10 weeks, I think, when we kind of did all the math to figure out how far along she was whenever she had the abortion procedure. And all my life she would tell me, see, I was born at home and there was just a police officer there. And so once they got to the hospital, they took me and did whatever they did. And when they brought me back to her, she was so afraid they had switched her baby with somebody else's baby. So before she let them haul me off, she would look at my fingernails, and she said I had the most beautiful fingernails. She went on and on about my fingernails. And I always heard the story growing up. And then whenever they brought me back to her, she checked, and yes, it was her baby. Those were the baby's fingernails. And I just recently learned that it's 10 weeks when God's knitting and forming that little precious baby together, and the fingernails have been formed at that point. So I just thought that was kind of a little wink from God. So
That's beautiful. What has surprised you maybe as you started to share your story, or maybe you went through the Abortion Survivors Network healing, or developed community? What surprises you on this journey? Because we're normal people who have these amazing God ordained stories, and so like we learn along the way.
that's true. Yeah. One of the things that surprised me when we held our first, it was during COVID, we had our first retreat, but we did it virtually, the Abortion Survivors Network. And that was very, very impactful. It was tough because, during that online thing, it came to, I guess I was, I saw other survivors that survived horrendous things, you being one of them, just thinking about what you went through, in your mother's womb. And then I almost felt like I'd been hit by a truck afterwards, because I also had I just felt guilty in a sense, even though I didn't do anything, but I knew that it was because of the illegal back alley abortions. That's what they used to legalize abortion in the first place. And so I almost had a sense of guilt because that was part of my story, even though I was a victim in that story. And that surprised me. And that was part of what I had to kind of work through too, is uh, just feeling not just rejection from those who support abortion, but concerned about being rejected by those that have been impacted by it.
That's such a vulnerable thing to share. And I know thanked you before for sharing that, but I want to make sure that the audience really understands what you just said, which is, as I often remind people, so I'm a Roe survivor. We have babies surviving still today post Roe, but we have, oh man, tens of thousands of babies who survived before Roe. And what you were just talking about, Michele, is so, so important for people to recognize is for those who were born from failed abortions before Roe, there is often this piece that feels responsible for Roe being passed. That because your birth mother was going through the experience that she was and quote unquote was putting her life in danger, therefore abortion had to be legalized. And that it's your fault for existing, right? It's your fault for, yeah, it's simply your fault for existing and daring
Yeah.
to survive.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want
Remember, yeah.
people to put themselves in your shoes to say, if I was in Michelle's shoes, what must it feel like? Instead of thinking, oh, they need to sit down and be quiet and not talk about this. How about just have some empathy to say, what would it be like to be in Michelle's shoes? Would I feel guilty too? What would I feel? Would I feel pride for surviving? How does one find that after they survived an abortion in the world that we live in? Put themselves in your shoes to say, you know what? How do I find forgiveness with everything that I've gone through in my own family that has had dysfunction? How do I thrive in the face of adversity? I think you do an incredible job of being bold, which I know is who you are. That is your spirit. But you also are so compassionate, and you are one of those people who provides an example simply by how you live your life. And you are a beautiful example in the wife that you are, the mother that you are, the daughter, your sister. Man, I so enjoyed getting to meet some of your family recently after all these years. I mean, that brings me joy to get to know your guys' lives as well. And so I thank you for allowing me to be a part of your family's life. As we're
Yeah.
closing today, I would love to hear from you. What do you think is one of the greatest misconceptions that our world has about abortion survivors? What do you wish our culture knew?
I guess that our lives matter. That we are the face of choice, right? When you're talking about an abortion, you're talking about a person. You're talking about not just that person, but all the people that person's life, would and will impact, and future children, generational. So, and I think we're marginalized people. And I think that it's just, right now what we're having is yes, it's political. A lot of things are political, right? All kinds of things, because we use politics in order to protect people, society, and such. But it's more than political. It's a human rights violation. And whenever people are pro-choice, um, that hurts abortion survivors when all the rhetoric and all that, because then it's very personal for us, because we understand, we understand what that really means.
Yeah, behind the word choice is a person. It doesn't matter if it was before Roe, during Roe, after Roe. Doesn't matter if it was in a back alley or a clinic, or if it was a coat hanger or the abortion pill. Abortion is abortion is abortion. And it is, the intended goal is to always take human life. Like, that is the
in a
fact of the matter.
barbaric way. Yeah, in a very barbaric way. I mean, when would it ever be okay to say that when somebody's violated and somebody's harmed, we're going to celebrate it, or we're going to, it's justifiable. We don't do that in, domestic violence. We don't do it in rape. We don't do it in child abuse. It should never be okay. And as an abortion survivor, it's very hurtful for me, and I'm sure others, whenever our society, those within our society, not only want to say it's okay, but they want to celebrate it and choose to vote certain ways to not even protect the babies after they're born alive accidentally.
It is an injustice. And by those of us who know that truth very intimately, by us raising our voices together, I know that we are making a difference. So I want to thank you for raising your voice alongside me and so many people. If
Yes.
people want to know more about your story, or maybe, where you are in the Pac Northwest, what's an easy way for people to find you, Michele?
I think they can email me at everylifematters22@gmail.com.
Yep, easiest way would be through email. They can also, of course, find your story on the Abortion Survivors Network website. We also have a YouTube channel, so I got to put a plug in there. You have shared your story at a couple of different events, and so there would be a playlist there for Michele Lyman where you can hear more about her beautiful story and also get the chance to see what a great communicator she is. So
Yeah, really the best way is through Abortion Survivors Network. Yeah, thank you.
So thank you for joining us for this episode of Life Beyond Abortion. And again, a heartfelt thank you to you, Michele, for joining me as a guest and courageously sharing your story about life beyond abortion. Your story does matter, Michele, in this cultural conversation about abortion, because you matter. And I know you articulated that as well. If you've been touched by what you've heard today, I encourage you to share this episode and help amplify the truth about life beyond abortion. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us spread these abortion truths, transforming our culture one story at a time. For more information and to connect with our community at the Abortion Survivors Network and get to know survivors like Michele, you can visit our website at abortionsurvivors.org. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at the Abortion Survivors Network, or on X at ASN Official.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at Melissa Ohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.